we'll dive in here.
Great.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to have back Georgia King. Georgia, welcome back.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. So Georgia initially joined me back on episode 420. She's a therapist who specializes in providing mental health evaluations for immigration legal cases. In 2017, Georgia founded the Immigration Evaluation Training Center, through which she has taught hundreds of therapists around the country to provide effective immigration evaluations and create thriving businesses. Georgia has been a guest speaker at Georgetown Law School, the Smith College School for Social Work, and numerous chapters of NASW and the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. She currently lives in Los Angeles, where she maintains a private practice. And through her training center, she brings a commitment to working for social and racial justice and supporting other therapists in doing the same. Georgia, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Guy.
All right. So let's dive in here. Well, first of all, where are you right now? Where are you located?
Yeah. So I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay. Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Dallas. I grew up in the suburbs, a place called Garland, born and bred in Texas.
Okay. Why the switch?
I've lived a lot of places in my life, including San Francisco, New York City, and the DC area. And then eventually moved here for the sun. I need the sun.
Yeah, I completely
place
understand that. All right. So what you're doing is really, really interesting. You know, before we started recording here, you said, one of the things you want to do is just share the work, what it is you do. Let's start there.
Great. So what I do is I provide what's referred to as an immigration evaluation. And when you hear this term, this simply means a mental health assessment for an immigration legal case. Now, I fell into the work completely by accident. I had no idea this existed. And when I think about it, this work could have so easily passed me by, and I would have never even known about it because it's not talked about. It's a little more known than it was, 10 years ago when I started out, but it's still all the time. I meet therapists who don't know that we can do this sort of amazingly meaningful niche work with immigration legal cases.
So, I could think of reasons why it isn't on the radar of a lot of people, why a lot of people don't know about it, but what are those reasons?
Well, please tell me if you, I think, it's the kind of thing where, once I stumbled into it because I was in private practice. I happened to move into a new office, and the office happened to be across the hall from these immigration lawyers. I love how life unfolds in this kind of way. And then there you are. If that hadn't happened, I don't know how this would have even crossed my radar. I think one theory I have a number of theories about why the work isn't more widely known. One theory I have is that whenever you hear an immigration lawyer talk about this work, they talk about therapists providing psychological evaluations for these immigration cases. Now, I know when I heard that term, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. When I heard that term, I thought that meant you had to do psych testing, and I thought you'd have to have a doctorate. So I think that just because it's referred to in that kind of way in immigration circles, I think it operates as kind of a smokescreen. And then all these therapists who are totally eligible to do the work don't realize it. That's the one thing. If anyone's listening and can hear one thing I'm saying, the work is so accessible. It's way more accessible than I think most therapists realize, because we already have the skill set. We know how to do mental health evaluations. We've done probably hundreds of them, if you've been in the field for a minute, or at least dozens, even if you're still in school or getting out of school. All you need is some training to translate the skills you have to this unique context of immigration law. That's all you need. You already have the skill set.
You said immigration cases. So are these evaluations being delivered to a select group of immigrants?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I work on a few different cases, but there are kinds of cases. Typically, an immigrant's going to find me because their immigration lawyer refers them to me for one of these evaluations. I would say over the years, I've done something more than 100 of these cases. I'd say almost half have been asylum cases. And then almost half have been what's called an extreme hardship waiver. And so for an asylum case, just to maybe break this down quickly for anyone who may not know how this operates, basically when we provide a mental health assessment for a case, it provides evidence for the case. And so, for instance, with an asylum case, someone's been through persecution in their home country, but they may not have any physical scars. They may not have any evidence at all about what they've been through, why their life would be in danger if they had to go back to their home country. But we can come in and document the invisible scars of PTSD, depression, what have you, and that helps provide evidence for their case. So a lot of the cases that I work on are these asylum cases. They focus on trauma. The other cases, though, that I work on a good bit is I actually am interviewing someone who is a US citizen and who's married to an undocumented immigrant. And these are called extreme hardship waivers. So that also covers a lot of the different kinds of cases, different kinds of clients that I work with.
So let's get into a little bit more about it. We were talking about currently, asylum seekers who are victims of gang violence and domestic violence. Break that down for us. What is the current state of immigrants and immigrants who are experiencing that type of trauma?
Sure. Yeah. So when I started out in 2012, so almost 10 years ago, I worked on a lot of asylum cases that involved someone who was fleeing life-threatening domestic violence or life-threatening gang violence. And just to back up a step even beyond that, to apply for asylum, you have to show that you're part of a targeted social group.
Okay.
And so just to say, I'm not a lawyer, I haven't been to law school. So I'm just speaking from my experience. I always just encourage therapists to verify everything, do their own research. But just to say, kind of from my experience, someone has to show they're part of a targeted social group. And this might be based on race or sexual orientation, political views, religion, all kinds of things. And for a long time, you could also qualify for asylum if you were fleeing life-threatening domestic violence or gang violence. So like I said, I worked on a lot of these cases when I was starting out in 2012. However, a few years ago, under the last administration, they cut out all those people. They cut out everyone fleeing gang violence and domestic violence and said, you can no longer qualify. You're no longer eligible for asylum. So all these people who were fleeing these really life-threatening circumstances suddenly didn't have any options here.
You mean under the previous administration?
Yeah, exactly.
Why was that done? Why did they cut them out? Just because they didn't want? We're getting into politics here.
I know,
but is that the reason they just didn't want? They were an easy target to just cut out, or what?
Yes, I think so. And it was just a really inhumane kind of an act. It was a way to say, we want to keep things more closed down rather than more open to the people who really need this.
So, okay. So currently now have things changed?
Yeah. So recently they reversed this decision. And so we're once again able to help people apply for asylum who are fleeing gang violence or domestic violence. And it's such an exciting development. So many more people are eligible and have a chance to save their own lives, basically, to come here and save their own lives.
So those people who have experienced gang violence or domestic violence or both, and who are seeking asylum, they have to retain a lawyer who in turn turns to you, for example?
It's complex a little bit. Someone does not have to retain a lawyer, and they're not offered a lawyer. That's not like a right that they have.
Okay.
So there are lots of immigrants who can't afford a lawyer and who don't have that benefit. Now, I work on pro bono cases like this sometimes, where maybe someone doesn't have a lawyer, maybe they have just gotten legal services pro bono through an agency, something like that. So that's how I might interact with an immigrant in that kind of situation. More often, though, the immigrants that I see are ones who have some amount of financial means, enough to where they can hire a lawyer. And then the lawyer looks at their case and says, oh, you could really benefit from one of these mental health evaluations. Here's Georgia King's information. Contact her.
So the evaluation involves what? Are you providing quote unquote therapy?
Nope, it's not
Okay.
therapy. It's very short term, concrete kind of work. So I just meet with the client twice, about an hour to an hour and a half each time, and then I write up the report. I give them referrals oftentimes, to see a therapist, but my role in it is really concrete and distinct. I'm
Hmm.
not doing therapy. I'm just meeting with them twice and writing up the report.
And why you said this whole field path kind of unfolded for you? What drew you to it?
How I love how you can look back and see things like the dots connecting in a way that you couldn't see at the time. I mentioned this when I met you before on the podcast, but my grandfather, my mom's dad, was a humanitarian worker in Guatemala City for like 20 years when I was growing up. I visited him for the first time when I was 11, and it was incredibly eye-opening in ways that I didn't even fully realize until afterwards. And he was someone who was really awake about injustice. He was pointing out white privilege, racism, stereotypes. From the moment I got there, he was pointing these things out. And I
Hmm.
was coming from a home that was really conservative. So I, was growing up with this idea of it's a level playing field and oppression doesn't exist, and all this white privilege that buffered me from having to think about these things. And also, in retrospect, so much privilege as a US citizen, someone who just happened to be born a US citizen. I've always been surrounded by immigrants, and never have had to think about it. And I think that's often how privilege operates. I've had the privilege not to have to think
Hmm.
about these things. So I think that going to Guatemala, visiting my grandparents, it gave me this international perspective, and just having the benefit of my granddad's wisdom and kind of what was important to him. I think it really planted seeds that kind of came back around for me once I went to social work school. I went to the Smith College School for Social Work. So sort of that sort of added to that journey for me. And then I never would have predicted that I'd be working in immigration law. I think that, like I said, I happened to move in across the hall from these lawyers, and they asked me to do these cases. I was really reluctant. Finally,
Why were you reluctant?
um, I didn't believe that this was a real thing,
Hmm.
and I didn't believe that I would be eligible, and I was just scared to get involved, and the stakes are so high. I was scared that I would mess up someone's life, or that
Mm.
I'd work on this and then suddenly find out my license wasn't eligible or something. um yeah, I was just nervous. And I think, honestly, I think that it was mostly because I'd never heard of it before.
Hmm.
If I'd heard a podcast of someone talking about it, or if they'd mentioned it at my social work school, if I'd ever heard of it, I think that I would have been much more likely to jump in. But as it was, I really kept my distance. But I kept talking to these lawyers. Their passion was really compelling to me. And so I got a little bit of training, what I could find. I jumped in, and then honestly, I think what did it for me was when we started finding out the cases were winning. And
Hmm.
that feeling is just so unbelievable for me. Like, to work
Mm.
on a case, to know what someone, the kind of circumstances that someone has fled from, to be able to help them get safety. It's just addictive. I was just hooked.
That's amazing. I mean, this feels, and you can see it in your eyes, and you can feel your passion. This sounds like life transforming.
Yeah. Absolutely. No question. And I mean, I would have thought that I would have to join the Peace Corps to do something like this, or travel abroad. I had no idea I could make this kind of impact just from my living room. You're doing Zoom interviews, writing up the report. It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable.
So are you're doing evaluations to see if they excuse me qualify?
In a way, it's a good question. I'm always careful to sort of stay within my scope of practice and think through, what's my role in this? What's the lawyer's role in this? It's going to be the lawyer's job to try to win the case. But what I'm doing is providing this mental health assessment, documenting psychological symptoms, and how this ends up working is it's evidence for their case. So it
Hmm.
helps prove that someone's telling the truth, that yes, they
Hmm.
went through persecution in their home country. These are all the signs, all the signs of PTSD. I also do some amount of psychoeducation to kind of explain to lawyers and judges what PTSD looks like, how someone might present on the stand. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And so
Mhm.
that's also a really special thing to be able to kind of translate, be a translator between our world and the legal world.
Mhm. Now, you touched upon this a little bit, but you being a white woman with privilege, y- I guess you can't deny that that brings with it a certain weight to what you're doing. How does that play out for you? I mean, I don't know. I'm just.
Mhm. No, it's a great question. It's such a great question. I think, I think it plays out in a few different ways. I think in the most concrete way, when I'm sitting with someone, I feel like some of the work for me is a humility, spaciousness, not assuming that my way of looking at things is the way that someone else might look at things. Because I think that white privilege operates like that. Like we're told over and over that we're the norm, and it's just simply not true. And there are so many different ways of experiencing the world. So I think that there's a humility and curiosity that I try to bring to it. And then I think that there's also kind of an energy and a drive that I feel like um, in a way, I feel like my awareness of privilege is something that I find it very compelling to do the work. Like there's an energy and like a moral imperative to it,
Mhm.
that I think is part of the engine that drives me to both provide these evaluations, do as much low fee and pro bono as I can. Also, though, expand my business and help a wide range of immigrants from different backgrounds. And then also what's happening more and more with my training center is I'm able to help other therapists as they're starting out, launching their businesses. So really helping them also as business owners and as people who are doing the assessments.
That's another interesting aspect to this. I mean, first of all, being able to work with uh, people from all over the world,
Mhm.
such as you're working with, to me seems profoundly enriching and rewarding. And you're also helping other therapists not only learn about this, but create businesses for themselves. Talk about that. And I would guess that that might could be ground for what this is a business, but we all deal with that.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm glad you named it like that. And I don't know that it gets talked about enough, but there is that tension between, wanting to help as many people as possible and also needing to make a living, provide for our families. Yeah, so it's both of those things. And one of the things that I find so remarkable about the work is that it really lends itself to finding a balance of pro bono and full fee work because you're able to work with immigrants from so many different backgrounds.
Mhm.
So I'll work with, I'll do a pro bono assessment for someone who maybe fled here with just the clothes on their backs, who could never afford a full fee assessment. And then I might do a full fee assessment with someone from, I recently had a client from India with an MBA. So I'll work with different business professionals or people who are married to different business people or engineers or the whole range.
Mhm.
So it really lends itself to finding this balance.
Let me just remind everyone I'm speaking with Georgia King. Um, she can be reached at therapistimmigrationtraining.com. So therapists listen to this who are like, you know what? I think this has my name written all over it. What are they going to find at your website? Who are your people? Who are the people who you want to train? Or I don't even know if you might want to say your ideal client for this.
Sure. Yeah, I get to see a whole range of people, who are drawn to the work. So these are independently licensed therapists who have, either a master's or a doctorate. A lot are folks who are people of color, some of whom are immigrants themselves or have, close family members who are immigrants. And then I think it's something I've thought a lot about, especially over the last couple of years, is what this can look like for someone in terms of a business model and a career move, and that's so interesting to me. So I have some folks who maybe are working in an agency full time. They're maybe pretty burned out. I've done that, done the years of community mental health. I've done that. And so for some people, they want to start a private practice, and as far as a route to a private practice, this is a great one. It's very flexible because a lot of the work is writing, and you can do the writing from anywhere. You can do it, in the morning or on the weekend, or when you have a no-show, or whenever. It fits really well into somebody's career, if they're doing an agency job as well. And then I have other therapists who, a lot of whom are passionate about social justice, passionate, about trying to work for a better life for immigrants. Some people have maybe even a successful private practice already, but they want to diversify their income. They want to have more flexibility, more balance. I find that it's a great complement to doing individual therapy because it uses a different part of my brain. I like being able to work from the cafe when I can, so you're able to fit it into your life in a lot of different ways.
And you help people create this path or journey for themselves career-wise?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's something that I've just totally focused on more and more. When I designed my training, I designed it to offer all the support that I wish that I had had when I was starting out, 9-10 years ago, when this was much more obscure. I've done a lot to offer, even beyond the training, I offer ongoing support. So I have a private Facebook group for alums of the program. We have monthly consultation webinars, and I keep myself really available. And so that's also something. But as far as the business side of it, yeah, I provide concrete marketing tips, an email script to send out to lawyers, samples of different flyers that, someone can use, all the strategies and the tools that somebody needs to really hit the ground running. Because I'm just, life is short. We all have limited time and energy and resources. So if you're gonna move in a direction, like, let's do this. Let me give you everything you need so you can just hit the ground running.
Right. Excuse me. I love the how this seems to kind of be inspiring on so many levels. I mean, the thing that reaches out to me is the social justice, the racial justice, being able to, is it too far to say that you're an advocate?
I definitely identify that way. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I'll describe the work that way, like I advocate for immigrants by providing these assessments for legal cases. Yeah.
Is that, of people who want to be an advocate or who want to play a role in social justice and racial justice, this would be a good spot for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think? You talked about, that experience in Guatemala with and so forth, that early experience you had. What do you think drives you in this work in addition to that?
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but I think that it's that moment of finding out that a case you worked on was successful. It's just, I'm just laughing because it's so hard. It's just pretty mind blowing to me still. And before this, all I did was individual therapy. I went to school to be a therapist. I love being a therapist. I still do that on the side some. It's so meaningful. It's been deeply meaningful for me personally, as someone who's been in therapy at times off and on for a long time. But the gains are very small over time. It's like, oh, someone can tolerate affect more than they could 3 months ago or 6 months ago, or healing work oftentimes is so slow moving. Whereas I think part of the thrill with this work is that it's very direct. You do this work, you do this, the meetings, and then the writing up of the report, and then you're done. And then the payoff is just unbelievable. Because I think that, and as a therapist, we can only do so much, and it's powerful. I love being a therapist. I love being in therapy. But you can't generally change their external circumstances. You can't generally help their external circumstances be safer.
Right.
Whereas when
nor is it your job, in a sense,
right. And that's there's all empowerment, and they can make their own changes, and it's a beautiful model. I love it, absolutely.
Right.
But to work on these cases, I work, for instance, with so many members of the LGBTQ community from countries around the world. So to be able to sit with them, not only as a witness, as someone to document their story, but to be able to use my skills to advocate for them, in this particular way, and then to hear back that it's successful and you helped this happen for them to be able to stay here in safety, or at least relative, so much more safety than they would have in their home country. It's just unbelievable.
That is amazing. I can feel how incredible that would be to really to do that. Under what circumstances, and I realize there could be many, but under what circumstances might you do an evaluation and their case isn't one, or yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, those moments. I've been blessed to work with really excellent lawyers. So the rate of success has been really high, from the cases that I hear about. Honestly, a lot of cases you never hear about because it takes sometimes even years to go through the court
Wow.
system. So you don't necessarily hear back, and that's probably more often the case. There've been a couple. There've been maybe two I can think of over the years where you hear back that it's not successful, and yeah, that's hard, that kind of a moment. Often though, there's some kind of appeal process even afterwards. So often, even if there's an initial roadblock, there's still hope in the case oftentimes. So it's part of kind of the whole landscape, and it's not easy, but it is also meaningful to feel like, I did my best with this. I
Right.
did what I could. And then also this sense of we can't control the outcome. I think that's
Right.
important just as humans, the sort of letting go of control. That we can only do our part to the best that we can. And
Right.
that's what we can
Right.
do.
Awesome. Georgia, man, you're inspiring. You really are. It's not often that, we get to hear of people who are doing the work you're doing. Like we said earlier on in the podcast, a lot of people don't even know about this work, but it's to me to be able to have an effect and an impact on someone like that is really incredible. It's inspiring, and I think it's we need that in this world.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think that, as therapists, it's amazing to be able to add something into your practice or to complement your job in an agency, that can make such an impact in other people's lives, and then also in your own life as a business owner, or as just, a clinical social worker or therapist. And I think that, again, if I could get any message across to people, it's that the work is way more accessible than you might think. It's so accessible. If I had known that starting out, I would have jumped in a flash. So just to encourage folks, whether you train with me or train with someone else, seek out some solid training. Solid training is going to give you the tools that make this so easy. That's the other thing, is that, I give people my templates that I've developed over the last 10 years working with, dozens of lawyers around the country. You get really proven tools, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can get these tools just handed to you, and you can pick up and just run with them. So
And
it's a lot easier than you might expect.
the training is it all online?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all online over Zoom. I offer usually about 2 workshops a year now. I used to do more, but now I'm sort of consolidating them. I
Okay.
have the last one of the year is going to be the first weekend in November, and folks can check that out. I also offer like a free hour intro webinar. So if anybody wants to hear, more of the nuts and bolts, they can always go to my website and sign up for that as well.
Okay. We'll have that linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. All right, Georgia, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, just go to my website, therapistimmigrationtraining.com.
Okay.
You can contact me, through the website. I'm so glad to answer any questions. I'm glad to offer, any support that I can for someone who's curious about the work.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, incredible and inspiring. My gosh, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be listening to this and wanting to reach out. I mean, I think people who get into this field, who get into the field of therapy, obviously want to help people. I mean, and that can be defined in many ways, but to be able to do it on this level and to have this kind of profound impact, I think is super inspiring.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you and to feel your passion also for the work, all this good work that we get to do as therapists.
I appreciate that. We'll be in touch.
Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
Take care.